Cuss Road. You got to be happy there, right?
Yeah, you got to be. Yes. Well, luckily, we're joined today by. Let's go clockwise. We've got Milbillie here. We've got the Hodd himself, and we've got Leslie. Hi, Leslie Eisenberg. How's it going?
Fine.
So it really is a wig, then. It really is a wig that gives you the big hair, bushy hair.
I deny all responsibility.
Yeah. I take it this is something to do with the fact that when you're looking through the documents, you often quote the Leslie Eisenberg stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okie dokie. First of all, gentlemen, how's the weekend been from a sporting point of view? Milbillie, how did the Packers get on? They were 10-0 up after the first quarter. I stopped watching. I assume they won comfortably.
Nope.
You wouldn't care to enlighten us on the final score?
Well, it ended up being 38-10.
Wow.
All
And
defense.
Yeah, and as you were saying, the fact that they'd in their first 4 games, no interceptions whatsoever, and then all of a sudden a load of them.
No, they didn't. They ran. Tampa Bay ran all over Green Bay. They couldn't stop them.
Right. They did have one huge fella called, is it Gronkowski?
Yeah, Gronkowski came back out. He retired at the end of last year, and he came back out after Brady got traded to the Buccaneers from New England.
He did a Bushman. He came out of retirement.
Yes. Anyway, talking about happier, something a bit happier. Your team Spurs, they got a good win, didn't they, at the weekend?
No, it was a draw, I believe.
Never. I think they were 3-0 up after about 15 minutes, was it? 15 minutes?
It ended up 3-3.
Ended up 3-3 with West Ham equalising it was the very last kick of the game.
I believe so. I didn't actually watch it. I was at work.
And you've got experts blaming the goalkeeper for letting the goal in. But anyway, never mind. Anyway, on a happier note, Mark, how's the rugby league going?
Last weekend, that is the weekend just ended, it was the qualifying finals. In other words, the winners of those games went to the grand final next Sunday. Yep. Unfortunately, my team, who was in one of those qualifying finals, got beaten 20-16.
Very close.
Very close. Overall, very good weekend. Should be a good game next week on Sunday. They're allowed to have, because we have low COVID numbers in Australia and in my state in particular, that they're allowed to have up to 40,000 people at the major grand final. So, in the ones this last weekend, they were allowed to have up to about 30,000. So,
yeah. I noticed, actually, moving on to a different code, I noticed that the All Blacks played Australia at Eden Park, and there were 46,000 at that game.
There were 16,000 people.
Sorry?
There were 16,000 people at the Buccaneers game.
Yeah, there was a few there. But we won't mention the score of the All Blacks versus Australia, will we? Because they got a draw the last game.
No. Didn't your mother teach you to be polite? Don't say anything unless you've got something nice to say. So come on.
Okay, then.
He's
Leslie.
Italian. That's
That's right.
Moving on to the Aussie rules football. I actually know who's in the final now, and I must admit my tendencies are I'm leaning towards I'd like to see Geelong win with that big guy Hawkins kicking a few goals because he seems to be coming back into form.
Yes. If I could just say how it all panned out. It was a complete disaster for Port Adelaide, right, who were on top of the AFL ladder all year, right? They had 2 home games. They didn't have to travel at all. They won their first one, had a week off, and they lost against Richmond by 1 goal, right? So the whole season, just a total waste. And, the incredible thing is that now Richmond potentially can win 3 flags in 4 years. Lord help us all if they win.
Yeah. Remind us on the geography. Whereabouts is Richmond? The only Richmond I know is in London.
Richmond is a Victorian-based team. They're known as the Tigers.
Right.
They beat the Crows in 2017. They won last year very comfortably, and they're in the grand final again.
Yeah.
They're a very, very dangerous team. But then again, Geelong, I think Geelong are well primed.
Right.
You never know. They may win. I don't care who wins, as long as it's not Richmond.
I'll help you out with the geography, Paul. Richmond's is a southeastern suburb of the city, right on the edge of the city, exactly where the Melbourne Cricket Ground is. So.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd call it an inner city club. So.
Yeah. In fact, I think you from one of the vantage points in Melbourne, you pointed out where the MCG was.
Oh, you can't miss it.
It's the
whole
110,000 capacity, something like that.
Something like that. And it's got the big Australian Open tennis centre there. It's a wonderful precinct for sport over there. So all in walking distance from the city. Everyone walks there, right? So
Anyway, who wants to know about Aston Villa?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, then we'll move on. Actually, I'll tell you who would be delighted with Aston Villa. It would be Diane Little Misty, because she's a Villa fan. So she would be delighted that. They won again last night, so looking good.
Awesome.
And the Exeter Chiefs 1-1 in rugby union. They won the European Championship and beat the very fancied French team from Paris called Racing 92. And they've spent loads of money on players. And Exeter, they went there and did a job. So well done to them. And I'm afraid your snooker player Neil Robertson lost in the final frame of the English Open to Judd Trump, no relation. Yeah,
I love this sporting introduction to your sessions, Paul. It's like next it'll be the weather first, then the sport, and then the news.
Weather,
right?
weather. I could talk about the weather.
People want to hear about murder, death, and dismemberment.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Speaking of which, Milbillie's on Cuss Road there, so you could go and check that tarp I can see in the background somewhere, I'm sure.
Okay, so going to Milbillie first, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the. You've provided us with some excellent videos over the past week. The interview with Steve by TV station in.
Yeah, it was a public access TV station.
Yeah, and what did we glean from that particular interview?
Well, it's 8 days after he's been released, and he's learning things he didn't know when he was locked up from his uncle.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
and Peg wants to bring up in her portion of the segment of the video that back then they relied on mug shots and stuff like that. Stephen Avery had 18 plus witnesses stating that he wasn't anywhere near that area, and they ignored it.
Yeah. Can you remember the name of Steve's uncle?
Arlen.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah,
the police officer. Yeah.
We actually see a bit of him, don't we, in Making a Murder at the very beginning?
A little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
So that would actually be Alan Avery's younger brother then.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
If I've got that right, I wonder what he's doing these days. No idea. Okay. The other thing I was going to mention, Milbillie, was that we hear Steve. Even then, he must have had conversations with Steve Glynn and Walt Kelly, because when the interviewer asks him about the level of compensation. Does she say that they've offered you? Is it $500,000, 500,000?
This is before Steve and them even got involved, because he doesn't take out his lawsuit for almost a year later. Because the state is starting to do their investigation, and then they deem that nothing nefarious happened, and it deemed it that the witness identified the wrong person, and that's why Stephen Avery was chosen. And that's why he opened up his lawsuit. And through the depositions that we have, you can clearly see it was going in Stephen's favor 1,000%.
Yeah. The other interesting one, you mentioned Pegel. There's quite a long deposition by is it Amy Lehman?
Yep.
That you put up. Is what did you manage to sort of glean from that? That was.
Well, we're going to probably doing Debs and just diving into the whole shit show.
Yeah.
Her and Deb Strauss, their statements conflict each other.
Yeah, I think you actually mentioned, don't you, about Deb Strauss? As soon as the Teresa disappears, that she's immediately saying, I don't like this Stephen Avery. I'll do what I can to help.
Yeah, she called Friday evening.
Yeah.
I think if I could just sort of say, Paul,
absolutely, sure.
I saw those two interviews that Milbillie put up, and the thing that struck me was how traumatized Stephen Avery looked.
Oh yeah.
It's like being plucked from outer space and then being plonked in front of a video camera, and the reporter, she was trying her best, to try and make light of the situation and try to make him feel comfortable. But he was just like staring into nothing. Yeah. He had big bushy beard, close cropped hair. He looked completely traumatized. And then compare and contrast the look on Pegel's face. It was just a joke.
Yeah.
I said, no problems. We'll sort it all out, boys. Nothing wrong here. It was just a mere mistake. We're gonna have an investigation, and everything will be right. It's just. And she hadn't even had a smirk on her face.
Yeah. There was Shane Henry. I thought at first Mark was holding Kathleen Zellner book and paper, but it's not actually Mark that's holding it. Who is actually holding the Wrecking Crew book and the paper?
Well, I'll just move my head and you'll see. Who do you reckon?
I reckon it's Mr. Avery Senior.
It is. He's sitting at his office in the salvage yard.
Yeah.
And he's holding a copy of Kathleen Zellner's appeal document.
Yeah.
And a copy of John Farrak's Wrecking Crew book.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. Okie dokie. One of the things I've been pointing out was remember this guy Carl Wardman, the juror, one of the jurors.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually a volunteer police, and I've had quite a few people get in touch with me about this particular individual. Some people say, well, there's nothing wrong with the police being on juries, and suggesting that in the UK it happens. I can assure you, certainly not in Scotland, it doesn't. You do not have police officers. I mean, this use of the word volunteer is very dodgy, because it's like it's trying to minimise the seriousness of the fact that this guy apparently in 2007. Okay, so. How many weeks was the trial? The trial was 4 weeks, wasn't it? 6 weeks. Yeah.
6.
About 5, nearly 6. Yeah.
Nearly 6. Correct.
So you can take that off his sort of possibility to work. By my calculation, 300 hours means that he would have done for 38 weeks. He would have done either 1 8-hour shift or 2 4-hour shifts each week. I mean, that's not. That's not just nipping down and helping serve coffee, is it? In the canteen. That's.
Mm-hmm.
But the big thing here, Paul, is that for justice to have credibility, is you want the removal of perceived, let alone actual conflicts of interest. They should never have been allowed. They should never have allowed him to be a part of the jury pool. and that should be just a matter of professional standards, let alone anything else. Yeah. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wardman was also the foreman, wasn't he? Was he the foreman of the jury?
Well, he could have been.
I think he was. And, you know, I know a bit more about him than perhaps I should discuss right at the moment, but
yeah,
I'm fairly certain he was the foreman of the jury as well.
Yeah. Well, he's the one that Rick, in Making a Murderer, says, you know, there was one guy there that was just not, he was not budging. He was making it quite clear.
Yeah,
he was budging and making everybody else feel uncomfortable, you know. So anyway.
So the conflict of interest is the big thing, you know, that's what I'm saying, you know. So
sure.
Would they actually have to announce their professions, what they did as jurors?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were listed.
So everyone would have known that he was a police officer.
Volunteer. They probably went with this major occupation. Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. In the actual Vardir, I think it's called, they actually do get onto the fact that he was a retired engineer, worked in a factory, but that he also did do this part-time volunteer sheriff stuff. But of course, the problem is for Dean and Jerry, they've got these, is it 150 sort of people that they've got to, you know, they've got to choose, 14 from, don't they? They have to choose. Is it 14
16,
or 16? And two of them are left as like spares.
Yeah.
4 of them are left as spares. I can't remember the exact.
And they only get a certain number of rejections. They can exactly no to a certain number. So you've got to be careful that you don't reject people that the next choices are even worse than that one. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the difficulty.
Yeah, and he comes up with this bizarre story that he was once framed by a policeman for $3, and that he's got this angst against the sheriff department, and he believes that yes, police and prosecutors they can lie, and I can't help thinking this was all to make Dean and Jerry think, oh, this isn't bad, this is an honest enough guy, we'll go with him, you know.
Yeah,
left to the fact that they didn't have much choice in the matter.
Yeah, he sounds like a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
To get in there.
I wanted to get on back to Milbillie. We hear mention, of the fact that Steve says that when asked about compensation, he actually mentions the line $1 million a year. So that would be 18 million. And obviously we know that it was the civil suit in the end was 36. And that was exasperated, wasn't it, by Glyn and Kelly finding out about the phone call, the 95 phone call. Mm-hmm. Anybody, any thoughts on what they're going to have to compensate Steve this time round?
Let's just say it'll be a lot.
No amount of money can ever...
No.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of money. Sorry, Milbillie, go ahead.
Like he says in an interview, he lost everything, and all they ever wanted was a family.
That's right.
Yeah.
Any idea? Anybody got any idea as to what the annual budget for Manitowoc County is?
I'd be fibbing if I answer this question.
Go on then.
The annual budget in terms of expenditure is about 70 million. In terms of rate or tax revenue, it's about 40, I think, or 50.
Let me pop this up. This is our good friend Bob Ziegelbauer, and of course he was one of the ones, wasn't he, that actually spoke to Deborah Kakich and said, you're not going to go anywhere near the salvage yard. Yeah,
correct.
So he says, well, Mark, would you like to read out what Bob Ziegelbauer wrote and said to the Manitowoc County Board back in October 8th, 2019?
Gee, I feel like I'm in school here. Thank you, Chica.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Manitowoc County Board, the Manitowoc County 2020 budget that I'm proposing today calls for a tax levy for operations of $30 million to support total spending of $71 million. By the way, if you're wondering about the difference, that'll either be lending or reserves. Our mission is to keep delivering high quality services efficiently, taking as little from the taxpayer as we can. We have held, I need some box of tissues, hang on. We have held the line on taxes for 2020 again. The typical taxpayer will see a slight decrease in the county property tax. This is continued good news for taxpayers. Manitowoc County's long-term financial goals and priorities continue to be: 1, hold the line on taxes while delivering high-quality services. 2, keep our debt low, less than 10% of statutory maximum limit. Continue with a robust capital improvement program. 4, maintain our facilities, county trunk roads and equipment. 5, do anything we can to keep Stephen Avery in prison.
Exactly.
6, our financial plan is working. For an example of that, look to last year's financial results. Prior to the election in 2018, we agreed upon a budget that focused on transportation, borrowed $1.5 million and held the line on taxes. During the election campaign that followed, the fact that we were borrowing money for transportation was blown up as a sign that we needed to implement the local option county sales tax as a new dependable revenue. We resisted this and will again, but look how it turned out. This is like a book. For the year of 2018, we accumulated more than $1.5 million in surplus and reduced our debt by $420,000. Years like 2018 help us continue to keep our taxes as low as possible.
I know.
Do you want me to keep going?
It goes on and on and on like that. You know,
That's a really, forgive me, and I won't bother to explain why, but sure. I've read 1,000 financial reports in my life, and that's extremely amateurish way to actually present something. With due respect to Mr. What's his name?
Ziegelbauer. Bob
Ziegelbauer. Yeah. You know, and those numbers are frightfully low, by the way. There's what did we say was the number of people in Manitowoc County? We think about 60,000.
82,000.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. So those budget numbers seem pretty low to me. So, but
what about the budget figure where they got the 42 cents at the end? Oh my God, 42 cents.
Yeah, and I mean, how much is? I mean, I would go with Fleetside. He reckoned that they're probably looking Wisconsin in total paying Steve Stephen Brendan somewhere in the region of 170 million, which is like more than that's more than so not quite 3 years of that Manitowoc budget, but it's more than double.
Yeah, it'll come. Any compensation to Stephen and Brendan will come from multiple sources. It won't just come from Manitowoc or Calumet or whatever. So, but you know, one thing I would say about all of this is that Stephen would be happy to just get out of prison.
Yes,
there will be a civil claim. A reasonable claim is all that Stephen would be after, but the seriousness of what's happened here deserves something much more than that, even if that excessive amount went somewhere else, right? Because what they've done here someone needs to feel some pain about what's gone on here. So,
you can't. You got to put a full stop to this. You can't keep on, preventing justice from taking place. They know that the hammer is going to fall at some stage, and all they're doing is they're delaying the inevitable. And the punishment, I believe, and I agree with what Mark said, the punishment has got to be prohibitive enough such that it never, ever happens again. That's my opinion.
I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that, situations like Carl Wardman being a juror, apparently that is allowed. Situations like Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department being allowed to provide equipment to Calumet in the form of crackerjack detectives to go and search trailers 7 times, that's allowed. doing press conferences.
You hear the Calumet dispatcher ask Jerry Pagel, "Do you want us to bring our crime lab?" "Oh, no, we're using Calumet's. They're assisting us with everything."
Yeah. You've got situations like Ken Kratz does his press conference, which is completely unethical. And yet even that is not illegal. And you wonder, are you guys in America, are you serious? You're wondering why there's so much wrongful convictions. I mean, does anybody believe this notion? And I think it was Peg L that mentioned it, that they've got the best in America. They've got the best legal system in the world. Does anybody subscribe to that?
Not me.
No.
Well, look at the Ryan Ferguson case. Both the witnesses recanted their statements, and they still didn't want to do anything about it.
Yeah,
exactly.
The judge said, "Oh, why should I believe him now? He lied then."
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as somebody comes up with the fact that DNA proves it wasn't him, then they get onto this, and I've seen this a few times where they talk about, like in the Central Park 5, oh well, they must have been accomplices,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the reason why one person's DNA is there and the rest of them isn't. It's just because that person's DNA wiped out everybody else or something.
I think one of the problems is just trying to take a more holistic view, and from an outsider's perspective, is that there still exists in the US justice process this, I call it this yesteryear mentality, where the sheriff rides into town with his criminal and throws him in jail. There's still not the evolution of policing and other aspects of that is still locked in an era where cops are always right. Now, and they are more than often right, of course. In fact, we want them to be.
Yeah.
But there is still this very large level of disrespect or contempt for the general person about their conduct when it comes to criminal justice matters. So we see a large level of wrongful conviction because of a prevailing attitude in significant numbers enough that people are showing disrespect for what we all know should be best practice when it comes to law enforcement. And when that goes to things like immunity against prosecution for DAs and others, the lack of integrity commissions reviewing decisions, or the private prison process and so on, all these things in sum create a system where putting people in jail is now a business. Not an outcome of bad behavior.
All these privatized prisons everywhere now.
And what does a business need? They need customers. And in this case, it's people, right?
And the more people they house, the more money they're going to get from the government.
And they also become large lobbyists in the political world for the same reason. So it's just been allowed to evolve in a way that's extremely unhealthy. And Stephen and Brendan's cases, and then many like Brian's, and unfortunately dozens and dozens of others are symptomatic of a prevailing ill in the way law enforcement is dealt with in the US. So,
well, they say about 6% of all inmates in prison are there wrongfully.
Yeah,
and when you apply that number to a population of 2.3 million people in prison, it's massive numbers of people.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing, of course, just adding to what Mark said, is sort of like the power of the forensic scientist and the processing of evidence, right? And really how shockingly eyewitness testimony is, right? You look at the 1985 case, and as Milbillie said, Stephen actually had 16, I believe it was 16 material witnesses that testified, went in court, wrote statements.
Those are 16 people that were not related to him whatsoever.
Yes, correct. And it is amazing that Peg L had the audacity to, in her report, to finally blame Penny.
Yeah, that's Arlen's the one that told them that they traced his mugshot.
Yeah,
correct. And it goes to show where you have this incredible asymmetry, whereby in the court, you look at the court cases in 1985, you had Penny, who apparently was a very outstanding citizen in the community, and you had this so-called bum, Stephen Avery, who was a no good layabout, who had ran his cousin off the road. If you fast forward to 2005, what do we get? We get a good, clean Catholic girl, and Stephen Avery, who's a no-gooder, and he, just wants to stir trouble. And so hence you've got this incredible backlash, right? And you have, absolutely, of course, Ken Kratz, who does his press conference and basically pollutes the jury pool. Yes. And how are you going to recover from that?
No. What used to make me laugh is when you listen to that one bit of Ken Kratz saying, this young girl, this young woman, it's like he didn't do that by accident. Sorry, Milbillie, you were going to say something.
Freudian slip.
Yes.
She's reported missing at 2:37. That evening, Pagel goes on the news. By the next day, it's already been reported that one of the last stops was Stephen Avery. They don't even mention the other two people's.
Yeah.
That was the big headline.
Could I just add one final thing, if I may, to the whole issue of the level of wrongful conviction, and that is that in the US, the sheer numbers of people that are arrested for felony activity or criminal activity, if they all went to trial, the system would close down. They can't handle it. So something like 98% of all of those felonies get pleaded out, and so you have this massive incentive for prosecutors and others to say to people, well, if you don't plead guilty, you're going to get 15 or 20 years, but if you plead guilty, you only get 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And these often poor people go, well, gee, I'll take the lesser charge.
Exactly.
Next, right? So that you're not even seeing justice in action. It's all happening in negotiation, right? Mm-hmm. Not even happening in a courtroom. So
and that's before they even step into the courtroom.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, the system is very much broken. And if I could just add again, if you read the trial documents, what they were trying to imply when Buting was interrogating or questioning Culhane, she was saying, "Oh, your lab was under a lot of pressure, wasn't it?" Mm-hmm. Because the number of cases, the number of samples that they had to deal with escalated hugely. Yeah. And so hence she's trying to say, well, I process a lot of the material, hence I'm making all these mistakes, right? Yeah. Errors. And so Buting was trying to point out, well, how can you possibly come to a trial and present all this data when your own laboratory is under incredible pressure to bring out the results? And that's why Culhane said to Buting, the reason why I took a year to do Stephen's exoneration case is because I had more important cases before his. Mm-hmm. So the poor guy spent an extra year in prison for Culhane to do work that would have taken maybe 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask you guys about was the as I say, we see all these things that are permissible that we just go, this is crazy. But probably for me, the craziest thing of all is that Stephen Avery was found guilty based on a scenario that Teresa Halbach was shot in the garage.
Yeah.
And yet Brendan Dassey was found guilty by, I believe the jury, did it not come from Dane County?
Yes.
It wasn't actually a Manitowoc County.
No, the trial was held in Manitowoc, but the county came from outside. The jury came from outside.
And how on earth did that jury accept this story that Teresa Halbach was actually stabbed to death in Steve's garage?
Well, there's a presumption, Paul, that there's a presumption that the jury understood the basis on which Stephen was convicted. They probably didn't even have that in their head. No. They were looking at Brendan Dassey's case. Well, I mean, there's probably a bigger issue. Why would you even find him guilty anyway? That's another issue. But in terms of the conflict of decisions, the separation of a juror from a jury from a totally different county created a greater separation of that conflict idea. I don't think anyone would have realised that, other than obviously the lawyers. So,
but I mean, at the very least, it means quite simply, one of the jurors must be wrong.
Yeah, well,
and there should be, as you often go, some sort of checks and balances. There should be somebody looking at this, going, "Oh, the FBI should immediately be in there saying, okay, you cannot, this cannot abide."
It's what the jury didn't see. That's why what happened. I mean, Dean and Jerry were barred from doing so many things. People's testimony that the jury should have had was barred.
I mean, that's the role of a judge, right? You can't tell me that Jeremy Fox wouldn't have been well aware of what happened in Stephen's case, right?
It would have been
as a judge.
He was signing all the goddamn search warrants.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, I mean, but you have to admit, this is incredibly bizarre. How we have one victim and two different murder scenarios, and
no evidence.
Correct.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is, which I still can't work out, is how in the hell was Brendan charged with a mutilation of a corpse, and apparently his uncle wasn't, and it's like, it honestly, these two cases will go down in American history as some of the most infamous cases ever to go in front of a judge. And how Ken Kratz, Fallon, and Gunn pulled it off, you have to give kudos to them, because it's
sneaky.
Completely logic and common sense just flew out the window. You have this poor kid, right? And as Milbillie said, with no forensic evidence tying him to Teresa Halbach at all, right? And yet he got accused of rape, murder, mutilation of a corpse. And you're thinking, wait a minute, there is no forensic evidence to actually prove that Teresa Halbach was even there in the trailer. And so out of thin air, out of magic, they conjured up this scenario which had no basis. It was all fantasy, complete fantasy.
There's a couple of things with that, Dr. Silkman. One is that Brendan was charged with rape. Stephen wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was proposed that he be charged with rape. It was certainly in the initial sort of
the judge said that there's no proof, it's just speculation, so he threw the charge out.
Right. So then you're left with the scenario that, in this wicked scene of sweaty Stephen enticing his nephew in, that it was only Brendan that apparently raped Teresa.
Yes.
Which is obviously fanciful. But herein lies the key thing. The reason why this got through in the end was because of, I can't really speak about Brendan's trial, but in Stephen's trial, is that the jury were threatened, right? Yeah. The jurors were threatened. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
Jerry Parkle also acted improperly by presenting himself.
Scratch closing argument. He basically tells the jury, so what if all this evidence is planted? You are going to say that your police officers killed this young woman. You're going to have to go back into the public.
Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. And that's what happened within the jury room with those jurors who didn't want to rationalize an argument. You can't go from 7 not guilties and 2 undecideds to 12 guilties without some improper behavior going on. That just doesn't happen in a normal, rational way of looking at things, because there's no new evidence coming on the table. All the evidence has been presented. How do those 7 people suddenly change, or over 3 days, change their mind to guilty? And I can tell you, they were threatened, and that you saw the not guilty on the mutilation of a corpse as a compromise to get them across the line on the guilty charge for murder. That's what happened. I know that that's what's happened firsthand from a number of jurors. So, and they were fearful of living in because they were Manitowoc County jurors, right? in a trial in Calumet, they were fearful of what would happen back when they went back.
Absolutely.
The repercussions.
Yeah.
The repercussions would have been horrendous.
Yeah.
I mean,
but you yep.
Sorry, I was just going to ask sorry, you carry on. Yeah.
I was going to say, Paul, you see this. You remember how we were talking about hindsight?
Yeah.
Of the attorneys. You see, this was the biggest free pass that Buting and Strang could have given to the state, because when they named names, when they named Lenk and Colburn as the potential planters, this was a manna from heaven to the state, because they used that point to hammer it really hard to the jury, and hence put on that guilt factor that so now you're accusing these two fine gentlemen of not only planting but actually killing Teresa Horbach. Because remember what Ken Kratz said, you have to go the whole way. Not only were they planters, but they were actually killers. Even though Buting and Strang said, we never said that, you can see that the point was lost. Right? And the jury were thinking, oh my God, we have to walk, like Mark said, we have to walk in our community, and we've said that Stephen Avery is not guilty. It was going to be horrendous.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to finish off by just saying that, as I mentioned earlier, I've started reading this particular book, and I would strongly recommend it to anybody that wants to get an insight into the minds, particularly of prosecutors, because this is written by a former prosecutor called Mark Godsey, and he is now he's a defense attorney now with the Ohio Innocence Project, and there are a lot of references to making a murderer in it. So I would strongly recommend looking at that, and I'll be going through reading through the book, getting one or two bits and pieces.
Two things I want to say. First off, the 22nd, we will hear about Colburn's case.
Oh, yes.
And happy birthday to Brendan Dassey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
Milbillie, can I just say to you, thank you so much for all the things you're doing regarding, the audio recordings and videos. They're just wonderful to listen to. And I know it's a hell of a lot of work to do all that. And so it's much appreciated. And I'm very grateful for the work that you and your team, including Dr. Silkman, are doing. And
thank you.
And Paul, I've been seriously enjoying your reading of Kathleen Zellner's case. You have a talent that you make it interesting, right? I mean, it's interesting because people like me enjoy that stuff, but it's fascinating. And you're always willing to learn new words like axiomatic and
estoppel.
But yes, that's right. But I really do appreciate your taking up the cudgel and pushing on, just because of who you are, but also in Richard's name as well. I know much of that is behind that as well. So thank you to everyone. So.
Do you know, partly it's mainly just to educate myself. As you say, I do learn new words like, as you say, axiomatic. And what was another one that I learned the other day? It was to do with the sort of, I can't remember what the bloody word now is. Progeny. The sort of like the sort of offspring of certain cases, that then lead to other decisions. That was it. Progeny. I had to look that one up. Anyway,
I've learned a lot of new words from you too, Paul, including the word havering.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, listen, team. We'll go in reverse order. Dr. Silkman, thank you again for joining us. Hope the Geelong Cats are successful. Is it this weekend that they play? Yep.
Yes, it is at the Gabba. At the
Gabba. Excellent. Yes. Look forward to that. Mark, as always, pleasure to see you, mate.
Thank you, Mr. Cavaldi. All the best to you.
And Mr. Milbillie, with your green screen, that looks absolutely fantastic. Having all the photographs there. Brilliant.
I got plenty of photos.
Excellent. Well, we'll catch you all again next week. same time, if that's okay.
As long as I'm not at work.
Thank you so much.
Exactly.
All the
Cheers,
best,
mate.
gentlemen.
We'll catch
Bye.
you all
Take
later.
care, guys.
Yeah.